Welcome to the second session of Agenda 2063 discussion. And in this second part, I will talk about this subsection of Agenda 2063 strategic framework, written integrated Africa. This section of integrated Africa envisioned various goals, and in this second session, as I did in the first session, I will identify the goals or the provisions of Agenda 2063 under integrated Africa. Then I will rate Africa's achievement of these goals as of 2023. Then I will identify what Africa is not doing right, leading to the underachievement of these goals. Then lastly, I will give the strategies that Africa and African governments can use to right the wrongs. Now, under integrated Africa, within Agenda 2063 strategic framework, one of the goals, one of the provisions of Africa and African Union is that there will be free movement of goods, services, and capital, and persons traveling to any member state could get the visa at the point of entry. Now, this goal, this provision, stated and envisioned that by 2063, Africa will be experiencing free movement of goods, services, and capital, and individuals traveling to any member state could get the visa at the point of entry. I think this provision envisioned boundaryless Africa, an Africa that was open to trade, an Africa that was open to the movement of people from one country to the other. I want to rate this provision, the achievement of this provision, I want to give it a 8 out of 10. Why am I rating the free movement of goods, services, and capital and persons in Africa an 8 out of 10? I understand today that very many countries, based on their regional belongings, regional memberships, are now having boundaryless, borderless. They have no boundaries. They allow the free movement of goods, services, and capital across their boundaries, their colonial boundaries, without significant restrictions. I take an example of East Africa. East African countries comprising, among others, Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, Somalia. These countries are now allowing the free movement of goods across their borders. They're allowing the free movement of people across their borders without necessarily having visas or passports. As a Kenyan, I can go to Uganda with my national identity card. As a Kenyan, I can go to Somalia with my national identity card. And as a Kenyan, I can go to Tanzania with my national identity card. I think to this point, Africa is on the right track towards achieving the free movement of goods, services, and capital and persons from one country to the other. I want to look at the second provision or the second goal within the integrated Africa Agenda 2063 provision. This goal states that the volume of inter-African trade, especially in agricultural value-added products, would increase threefold by 2063. This provision envisioned that Africa's volume of inter-African trade in agricultural value-added products would increase 3 times by 2063. I want to say that over the years, let me first rate the achievement of this goal. I want to say that Africa's trade has tremendously increased, and I would rate it 7 out of 10. Why am I rating this provision a 7 out of 10? We understand that Africa has been facing significant natural and man-made problems that has undermined its agricultural growth. Africa has been facing massive and widespread droughts and famines. Africa has been fighting pests, and most recently, Africa was plagued under the clouds of COVID-19. These happenings, these events, significantly declined Africa's agricultural production. Within the agricultural areas, crops underperformed, leading to low yields. And in this context, Africa experienced a significantly reduced agricultural production. And I believe that the volume of inter-African trade in agricultural value-added products decreased between, let me say, from 2017 to 2023. And I have explained that the reduction in inter-African trade reduced due to droughts and due to the effects of COVID-19. The third provision of Integrated Africa Agenda 2063 requirement or strategic framework is that African skies will be open to all African airlines. African skies will be open to all African airlines. I will rate this one out 9 out of 10 because I see significant progress. For example, in my country, Kenya, the national airline, Kenya Airways, is capable of flying to various destinations in Africa. Kenya Airways is capable of flying to Nigeria, flying to South Africa, flying to Congo, flying to North Africa, flying to East African countries, Central African countries, and any other part of Africa, leave alone other parts of the world. Now, this progress means that to some extent, Africa, let me say to a large extent, Africa has opened its skies to African airlines, and currently Africans can travel using their preferred airlines to any African country. But the problem, which I noted earlier, is the issue of passports and visas. Some African countries still require Africans to secure passports, to secure visas before entering their borders. I want to talk about the last provision under Integrated Africa, which states that regional power pools shall have been boosted by at least 50% increase in power generation, and the Inga Dam will be operational and will contribute to the powering of the industrial transformation of the continent and comfort of the citizenry. This provision is simply saying that by 2063, Africa shall have increased its hydroelectric power production by at least 50%. And this provision, the achievement of this provision, was based on the commitment and the completion of the Inga Dam. I will rate this one a 2 out of 10. I know some will contradict my rating, and will strongly contradict my statements on this. But I have to say openly that Africa has failed terribly to revamp its HEP power production. I want to shortly talk about Inga Dam. Inga Dam was a proposal by the African leaders who met in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia in 2015. They proposed that Inga Dam, which was to be built across Congo River in DR Congo, was to produce, and I repeat, was to produce between 40 to 70 billion 40 to 70 billion watts of electricity. 40 to 70 billion watts of electricity is capable of supplying the whole of Africa. This means that Africa's completion of Inga Dam was to solve all its power problems by 2063. And if Africa was committed in the Inga Dam project, then the power problems currently experienced in the continent could have been resolved. I searched and I found that the Inga Dam project proposed the building of 7 HEP power stations at the site of Inga Falls in DR Congo. And this project was estimated to produce between 40 to 70 gigawatts. And this project, the Inga Dam project, was to be the world's largest HEP power station. World's largest HEP power station, the Inga project. I also found that the World Bank, the European Investment Bank, and the African Development Bank funded the feasibility and environmental impact studies of this project. But unfortunately, in 2016, the World Bank cancelled its funding of Inga Dam project. At the time of designing this strategic framework based on the development of the Inga Dam, South Africa, Angola, Nigeria, and DRC joined other African countries in declaring their interest in purchasing power from Inga Dam. Africa has failed to realize the Inga Dam project, and Africa has failed to understand that the completion of the Inga Dam project was the solution to all its power problems. The Inga Dam project holds Africa's answer to electricity. What can Africa do? What can Africa do, and what can Africans do to ensure that the provisions of integrated Africa under Agenda 2063 are achieved? What can Africa do? What can Africans do to ensure that there is free movement of goods, services, capital, and persons from one country to the other? And what can Africa and Africans do to ensure that the volume of inter-African trade, especially in agricultural value-added products, increase 3 times? What can Africans do to ensure that its skies are open to all African airlines? And what can Africa do, and what can Africans do to ensure that its power production increases by at least 50% before 2063? I state the same comments that I stated in the part 1 of this video. First, I want to inform Africans, and I want to inform our viewers that DR Congo is the heart of Africa. And I want to repeat that DR Congo is the heart of Africa. Solving problems in DR Congo equals solving problems in Africa. One of the first strategies, one of the urgent goals of Africans and African leaders should be solving the ongoing conflict in DRC Congo. Remember, when conflict rages in Congo, there will be no development, and the government will be unable to secure projects that are intended to improve the living standards of Congolese and Africans. The Inga Dam project is located in Congo. The completion of this project depends on peace and stability in DR Congo. If Congo is peaceful and if Congo is stable, then that means that the Inga Dam project will be completed even before 2063. Now, first and the most urgent issues that must be addressed to ensure that an integrated Africa is attained is for African governments, individual African countries, and individual African presidents to join efforts and ensure that the war in Congo ends. My second proposal is for African governments and African leaders to front for African unity. The founding fathers in 1963 emphasized the need for Africans to be united. The founding fathers emphasized the need for African countries to remove their borders and boundaries and pursue a united Africa. They guided Africans, they informed Africans that the current boundaries that we are seeing today were planted on us by colonialists. The colonialists instituted the boundaries to ensure that Africans remained disunited for easy control. Africans must learn that their disunity serves the interests of foreign governments. They must understand that their disunity is their underperformance, and their disunity works against their development. For Africa to progress to the future, for Africa to achieve Agenda 2063 in integrated Africa, Africa must be united. African governments must realize that the current boundaries deter development. They must realize that the current boundaries discourage progress, and therefore unity is a way of escaping the underdevelopment currently plaguing African countries. My last encouragement and my last advice, my last proposal to African countries, which I will not explain further, is for Africans to choose the right leaders. Agenda 2063 was a very good idea for Africa. Agenda 2063 spells progress to Africa, and Agenda 2063 envisions an Africa that is free, an Africa that is progressive, an Africa that is successful, and an Africa that is competitive in the world, in the global market. If Africa must achieve Agenda 2063 provisions, Africa must first eliminate the ongoing conflicts in various parts of the continent. Africa must see an end to the war in Congo. Africa must see an end to the war in Sudan. Africa must see an end to the war in Mali. Africa must see an end to the war in Burkina Faso, and Africa must see an end to the war in Libya. Eliminating these wars means that creating peace and stability in the continent. And peace and stability in the continent comes with positive development. Peace and stability comes with increased foreign investment. Africa must also realize that its unity is a key requirement. I must inform Africans that foreign governments are scared when Africa is united. Foreign governments are scared when Africa is united. This means that they will do everything possible to ensure that Africa remains disunited. They will do everything possible to ensure that Africa remains balkanized. And if we Africans, if African governments, if African states acknowledge the balkanization of the individual states, then it means that they are welcoming under progress, under performance. African leaders, African governments must ensure that African unity is achieved even before 2030. They must ensure that African unity is attained even before 2045. And Africans have a responsibility to ensure that the right leaders occupy leadership positions. And with these provisions and with these proposals implemented across African countries, I see Africa headed to the right direction. Thank you.